Martin Luther King and Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister, activist, and political philosopher who was one of the most prominent leaders in the Civil Rights Movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. He advanced civil rights for people of color in the United States through the use of nonviolent resistance and nonviolent civil disobedience against the Jim Crow law and other forms of legalized discrimination. King was one of the most influential leaders of the American civil rights movement. He believed in achieving equality through nonviolent resistance and peaceful protest. King promoted civil disobedience as a way to fight racial segregation and injustice. The Mendes case paved the way for a historic U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1954. In the case known as Brown v. Board of Education, the court ruled that racial separation in schools was unconstitutional. The decision applied to all public schools in the nation. Segregation or racial separation will be replaced by integration, the mixing of races on an equal footing. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, known as the NAACP, had presented the argument against segregation to the Supreme Court justices. The group greeted the ruling as a victory for all of the American people, and as a sign that the United States deserved to be the leader of the free world. Thurgood Marshall, a lawyer for the NAACP, who later became a Supreme Court justice himself, had been certain that after the bravery and patriotism that African American and Japanese American soldiers had shown in World War II, Americans would have to respect the country's black but Asian citizens as the equal of rights. But although the Supreme Court had made the racial integration in school the law of the land, integration remained largely a court ruling on paper. Years would pass before the nation's school district would put it fully into action. In the meantime, pressure for change would come not from the courts but from a people's movement for civil rights. The movement that was born in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, when an African American woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a city bus to a white man. She was arrested. Parks was not the first African American to challenge segregation on public buses in the South. Others, including teenagers, were also protesting discrimination in this way. Parks' arrest, however, triggered a large protest, a boycott in which the city's black population refused to ride the buses. A young black minister named Martin Luther King Jr. organized the protest. King had seen that although about half of the residents of Montgomery were black, most were limited to working as domestic servants or common laborers, and all were walled by segregation in schools and on buses. His inspiring leadership of the bus boycott helped him a better leader in the civil rights movement that was taking shape across the South. The civil rights movement challenged segregation through direct action. Confrontations occurred in Greenbustle, North Carolina, when black students sat on a drugstore lunch counter that had a white-only policy. Under the leadership of a group that called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or also known as the SNCC, similar sit-ins took place in dozens of cities and towns. These actions did not just end segregation at lunch counters, they brought an enormous growth in pride and self-respect among the young people who participated. I myself desegregated a lunch counter, not somebody else, not some big man, some powerful man, but me, little me, said one of the black students. I walked the picket line and I sat at the walls of segregation crumbled. Now all people can eat there. Freedom Rides soon followed. Organized by the Congress of Racial Equality, or also known as the CORE, in these acts of civil obedience, black and white civil rights supporters rode together in buses into sovereign bus terminals. There they were sometimes yanked from buses and brutally beaten by racist white mobs in front of television cameras. Medgar Evers, a leading black civil rights activist in Mississippi, was murdered in 1963. The summer of that year brought the famous march in Washington. 200,000 people gathered in the nation's capital to demand equality for all. The crowd massed near the Lincoln Memorial, which honored the president who had delivered the Gettysburg Address a century earlier, and who had freed the slaves with his Emancipation Proclamation. There Martin Luther King spoke to the marchers, the nation, and the world, sharing his visions of freedom in America. The civil rights movement continued to grow in strength and determination throughout the 1960s. One of the key moments came in 1965 during the Selma to Montgomery marches, which were organized to push for voting rights for African Americans. The marchers faced violent resistance from law enforcement, most notably by Bloody Sunday, when peaceful protesters were brutally attacked on the M1 Pettus Bridge. The national outrage that followed helped lead to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed discriminatory practices like literacy tests and poll taxes that had long been used to suppress black voters in the South. In years following King's death, his work continued to influence major social and political changes in the United States. The Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act, was signed into law just days after his assassination. This legislation made it illegal to discriminate in the sale, rental, or financing of house based on race, religion, or national origin. Though King did not live to see it passed, the act was a direct response to the movement he had led and the uproar of grief and anger that followed his assassination. His legacy helped push lawmakers to confront ongoing systemic inequality. Beyond laws and policies, Martin Luther King Jr.'s impact can be seen as continued activism for racial justice. His teachings have been embraced by movements such as Black Lives Matter, which echo his call for helpful protest and structural change. Around the world, King has become a global symbol for human rights, with his work quoted by leaders in struggles for freedom in South Africa to India. Each year, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is celebrated as a national holiday in the United States, a day not just to honor his memory, but to encourage community service, reflection, and renewed commitment to justice and equality. And this concludes our Martin Luther King presentation video. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.